Hi all, welcome to Sahidi, a channel for literary as well as critical discussions. Today, in this video, we'll be discussing the Poetics by Aristotle. All the opinions that I have expressed in this video are collected from various sources over the net, like lit charts, literary guides, etc. Let us move on to the video. As you all know, Aristotle is the most important Greek critic in ancient criticism. He was born around 384 BC in northern Greece. He got enrolled in Plato's academy. His parents died when he was 8 years old, and then he left his birthplace and he got enrolled in Plato's academy in Athens at the age of 17. After his education, he came back to his birthplace, and there he served as a personal tutor to Alexander the Great. And as we all know, he had made contributions to different subjects like philosophy, politics, physics, poetry, and biology. He has published over 200 books. The most important of his books are Nicomachean Poetics, Politics, and Rhetoric. Aristotle died in 322 BC. He is generally referred to as the father of Western philosophy. He had pioneered many theories in the fields of modern economics, politics, ethics, and science. And he had many prominent students, including Ptolemy. Ptolemy was a later pharaoh of Egypt. In his Poetics, Aristotle explores each component part of poet separately and discusses in detail about them. He enumerates different types of poetry: epic, tragedy, comedy, dithyrambic poetry, and lyre. So, when we discussed three dramatic unities, I gave you a brief idea on the origin of drama. So, there we saw that drama began as songs sung by the chorus in the altars of Dionysius. So, such songs sung by the chorus is called as dithyrambic poetry. And tragedy and comedy were also written in the form of verse during those times. Lyre refers to the music played with the help of instruments. So Aristotle says that all poetry is a form of imitation. What Plato said. So Plato already said that every art is a form of imitation. Here Aristotle also saying that poetry is a form of imitation. But it is different in three ways: its medium, its object, or its mode of imitation. So how is it different? So the medium in which every work manifests itself or every art form manifests itself is different. A painter uses a color, whereas a sculptor uses a shape, and a poet uses his language. Similarly, the object can be different. So sometimes the people may be using human beings as their object. Sometimes it can be some event. Sometimes it can be some thing. A poem about a rose, a poem about the solitary reaper, a poem about the daffodil. So the object of reference can be different in each case. It can be morally good or bad. So sometimes people may give you moral lessons through their works. Or at times they cannot be morally teaching works, but it is not a problem according to Aristotle. Whereas Plato focused on the moral aspect of art. Plato said that every work of art should have some moral aim, but Aristotle says it is not necessary. Whatever it be can be morally good or morally bad. It is not at all a problem. Then mode of imitation. So how is this work of art imitating these things? So if it is an epic, there it is mainly narration. If it is a drama, it is mainly imitation or acting. That is what Plato means, that all poetry is a form of imitation that only differs in three ways. So whatever you see in this world is copied in the art forms. For example, if you take the poem Daffodils. In the poem Daffodils, Wordsworth is copying a sight from the nature. So whatever he saw there, It can be classified as things. It is copied to his work in the medium of language, and there he is narrating the sea. So that is what Aristotle means there. Now, in the next part of Poetics, Aristotle says that human beings have a natural tendency for imitation. So how do we learn language? We learn language through imitation. So what our parents said, we just imitate them and we started using language. So human beings have a basic birth tendency to imitate things. So it is always there. That is why everywhere we can see this imitation. So when you see something, you feel like, okay, I should write something like that. When you read Wordsworth's poetry, we feel that we should imitate Wordsworth. That is what you saw in The English Teacher by R.K. Narayan, where Krishna is imitating Wordsworth. So the human beings have a general tendency for imitation. And another thing that he says is that people take pleasure in viewing distressing images from a safe distance, such as stage. This is something that many other psychologists have said, that human beings have a general sadistic tendency. That is, if you see an accident, nowadays it is increasing. We can see that many people go there and just look at this accident, or people are copying it and just sending it to their friends. So when something is not happening to us, if we are not directly involved in it, we find some pleasure in viewing such things. That is what makes the serials a success, because many people are suffering on the screen and we are very happily sitting in our sofa watching all these things. So Aristotle understands that every human being has this tendency of finding some pleasure in such distressing images. So when you find people suffering, we are happy because we are not a part of that suffering. So Aristotle says that human beings have this tendency of having some pleasure while viewing distressing images once they are not involved in it. And when such things occurs in a stage, we understand that it's just imitation, it is just acting, but still we find some pleasure. Similarly, human beings have a natural tendency for rhythm and melody. You can see that even small children, even if they don't know anything about rhythm or melody, once you get them a good tune, they can dance to it. So human beings have a natural tendency towards rhythm and melody. And therefore, the interest for poetry will be there with the human beings throughout their life. Next, he speaks about the tragedy and comedy. Actually, Plato in his Republic has said that tragedy and comedy both are bad to human beings. He says that in comedy, normally we laugh at the shortcomings of other people. When a dwarf comes in, we'll laugh at him. Or when somebody falls, we'll just fall at them. We'll laugh at them. So Plato says that such laughter is not good. People finding laughter in others' faults or other shortcomings was bad. But Aristotle says that it is not that inferior as Plato thinks. So comedy is imitating inferior people who are inferior in size or inferior in shape. They may have some problems, but that doesn't mean that such people are always inferior. Comedy makes use of such things in order to produce some laughter, but that is not going to inflict any pain in the audience or in the actors. So we should not speak so bad about comedy. Then he says, tragedy is born from dithyrambic poetry. That is the history of drama. That is something that we have already seen. Next, Aristotle brings in the major differences between epic and tragedy. So, as we have seen in the last slide, epic and tragedy are different forms of poem. So, here he brings in the major differences between epic and tragedy. So, he says epic uses only words. So, it is written in the verse form. Whereas tragedy uses songs and dialogue. So, there, even though it is written in the form of verse, it has songs involved in it as well as dialogue inside it. Then the next difference is epic is in narrative form. So it is like a narration from the point of view, from the perspective of a single character. Whereas tragedy is performed by actors. So you have multiple people on the stage and they all will be performing at the same time. So it is like a real life being staged on the in the theatre. Now, the next difference is usually told through the lens of single character narration. So, it is actually an extension of the second point. So, in an epic, it is like a narration and one particular character is narrating the whole story. So, we get the story from the perspective of this single character. Whereas in tragedy, it is performed by different actors and they will be explaining. So it will be like we will see the perspective of different people. And another important thing that comes in tragedy is that it produces emotions of pity and fear. In epic, we are just reading a story and therefore we may be moved by it, but it may not arouse a lot of emotions inside us. Whereas in tragedy, it arouses the emotions of pity and fear. This is more important. We will come to it later. Now, coming to epic, it is usually long, whereas a tragedy is restricted to the events of a single day. You may remember what we said about the dramatic unity of action. So, the happenings of a tragedy should be restricted to the events of a single day, whereas epic can speak about the life of a hero from his birth to death. It can be as long as that, but a tragedy cannot be so long. Next, we move on to the most important part of poetics. So, when poetics was revived, it looked like an incomplete work, and some part of poetics was already lost. So, what was revived was basically Aristotle's observations on poetry and tragedy. The major part of poetics deals with Aristotle's observations on tragedy. So, we will see what Aristotle had to say about tragedy. So first he says tragedy is a kind of imitation, but it has a serious purpose. So in the beginning of this slide, when I introduced the Greek masters, I told you about Plato. Plato was the master of Aristotle. So Plato was against all forms of art, mainly because they are all imitation. So Plato felt that when it imitates real life, so when you see the life of some person who got everything by his luck and he succeeded in his life, you may feel that, okay, even if I sit quiet, even if I do not do any hard work, I will get everything by luck. So, such imitations can give you wrong ideas. That was the problem that Plato set against these forms of art. So, Plato felt that these imitations of real life can be of can give wrong ideas to common people or they can misguide the common people. So he said that this imitation is not very good. But here Aristotle says tragedy is a kind of imitation. But it is not just imitating or it is not just giving you a story. Instead, it is imitating the real life for a serious purpose. It has a serious aim or an objective. Next, he says it uses direct action rather than narrative to achieve its end. So it is different from epic. It is not just narrating the incidents. It uses direct action on the stage. So people are performing on the stage, and because of that performance only, it can achieve its aim. So that performance is also important in achieving its aim. Now, next point that he says is poetic mimesis is imitation of things as they could be and not as they are. So, there he is giving you the major difference of Plato's understanding of tragedy and Aristotle's understanding of tragedy. So, Plato thinks that these tragedies or these epics, they are just copying the real life. So, what is the difference between a poem and history? Both of them are narrating the same thing. So here Aristotle says no, it is not the same. In history, you are just imitating or you are just noting down what has already happened. But in poetry, you are saying if this person had done it in such a way, everything would have changed, or if history repeats, we can do it like this. So in poetry, we are giving more imagination, or we are trying to explain how these things can be rather than how things are. So in history, it is just a statement of what has already happened, whereas poetry is a philosophical statement on what can happen, what all things have already happened, or if the if the way we react changes, how can things change, etc. So poetry includes more universal ideas, or it includes more ideals. So poetry is more philosophical than history. History is just a statement of facts, whereas poetry gives you a very detailed view of the incidents. Now, from the beginning of this slide itself, we were saying that tragedy, even though it is an imitation, it has a serious purpose. What is the serious purpose that Aristotle is speaking about? Aristotle says the serious purpose or the serious aim of tragedy is to bring about catharsis of spectator. So he is giving importance to the term catharsis. You can look at the spelling of catharsis. I have written C. In those days, Aristotle used K instead of C. Katharsis. But in modern English, we use C. So even if you see K instead of C, there is nothing to worry. It is the same. So in those days, Aristotle used K. So the aim of tragedy is to bring about the catharsis of the spectator. In order to bring out this catharsis, the audience should see some disastrous and moving change in the fortunes of the drama's protagonist. For example, here he gives the example of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. So as I told you in the earlier classes, Oedipus Rex was considered to be a very important play for the Greek critics as well as the Greek dramatists. And I have already given you the story of Oedipus Rex, where when Oedipus was born, the oracle said that he will kill his father and marry his mother, and then he was thrown away from the mountain. Another couple got him and they brought him up, and Oedipus came to know about this. So being afraid that he will kill his father and marry his mother, he ran away from there, and while coming to the town, coming back to Thebes, he met his biological father, but he didn't know that was his father. In a duel, he killed his father and he married the queen of the land, who was actually his mother. And so, till that point, and they lived together. Oedipus and his mother Jocasta lived together, and they had 4 children. So, till that point, from the point of view of Oedipus, you can see that Oedipus has got a very progressive life. Uh, he when he became aware of his life, he was living with a father and mother who were really loving and caring, and they were taking care of him. And then later he came to know that he may kill his father, so that is why he ran away from the town. But he became the king of Thebes, and he married the queen of Thebes, and he had 4 children. So till that point, from the point of view of Oedipus, it is a very progressive life. But as the audience, we feel pity for Oedipus. Without knowing that it is his father, he killed his father. Without knowing that it is his mother, he married his mother. He lived with her and had 4 children. So we feel a lot of pity for Oedipus. And it is filled in our hearts, or our hearts get filled with this emotion of pity. Now next what happens? Oedipus realizes that the person whom he killed was his father, his biological father, and the person who is his wife is his biological mother. This realization reverses his situation. So this realization and reversal are 2 important parts of tragedy. So at a point, he realizes that all that he gained was actual losses, and therefore his situation is reversed. He feels sad, or he feels condemned that he killed his father and he married his mother. Now at that point, he plans to punish himself, and that is why he is piercing his eyeballs. So then when he does that, or at that moment when he realizes that the person whom he killed is his father, the person whom he married is his mother, at that moment that emotions expressed by the actor can bring in some fear inside the audience. We'll try to identify ourselves with the hero. So that is another important aspect of tragedy. In the last class also, when we were discussing these things, I asked you, how many of you watch a film and cry? Why do you cry when the heroine is crying? Because we are identifying ourselves with the heroine. We put ourselves in the place of the heroine. We find her sufferings as our own sufferings, isn't it? Similarly, in a tragedy, the audience find themselves in the place of Oedipus, or they identify themselves with Oedipus and find all his sufferings as their own. And being in the position of Oedipus brings in a lot of pity and fear inside the mind of the spectators. So Aristotle here gives you a very detailed definition of catharsis. Aristotle refers to catharsis as purification. It is a process of purification where the mind of the audience is purified, or it is cleansed. So it is the ultimate aim of tragedy, and the main way in which this catharsis works is that there will be a series of events in the play which can arouse a sense of pity and fear in the audience. So you have a hero whom you all love very much. We all identify ourselves with the hero and we are very happy in his growth, and suddenly we come to know a large number of things, and with this recognition, everything reverses, and the hero is going to suffer a lot. And because of that suffering, there will be a lot of suffering for this hero, and that can arouse the sense of pity and fear in the audience. For example, the story of Othello. When Aristotle wrote about catharsis, Othello was not written, but for your understanding, I can give you the story of Othello. So in the beginning, Othello and Desdemona, they are having a very happy life, and we all identify ourselves with Othello and Desdemona, where they are very happily living together. And then Iago comes in and starts saying this and that to Othello, and he brings in a lot of suspicion in Othello about Desdemona. And when we are watching this play, we will be highly immersed in it, so that we also feel suspicious about Desdemona. We know the actual facts, but still when Iago speaks to Othello, we also feel like what Othello feels. Now at one point, Othello kills Desdemona, and then we know that Othello is going to know the truth. Later, Othello comes to know that it was all the play of Iago. Desdemona was not at all uh, cheating Iago. Desdemona was not at all cheating Othello. So we find that everything was done by Iago. And at that moment, Othello is giving a long speech, and that itself can bring in all these emotions of pity and fear in the audience. We feel heavy for Othello, and once Othello kills himself, we feel the fear. And by the end of the play, all these pity and fear is released from us. That is called as catharsis, where we all these emotions are built up in us by this tragedy, and by the end of the play we are purgated, we are freed of all these emotions. So the audience feel everything going out. Once Othello is killed, once Iago suffers, we find that everything is over, and then the audience feel a lot of uplifted. After crying for some time, we all feel cleansed, or we feel relieved. So that is what the audience also get at the end of this play. So tragedies that involve human suffering are effective in bringing catharsis. So if there is a lot of war, if there is a wounded person, a person without a leg, without a hand, and how he is being suffered in the hands of fate, such things can easily bring in purgation in the human mind. So Aristotle was of the opinion that this catharsis will help a person to purify himself. So he felt that if you have a lot of sufferings, but you are not ready to cry, you are not ready to express your problems, it will end up in making you mentally sick. And Aristotle says, after watching such plays, you develop some pity and fear in your minds, and by the end of the play, you relieve all your emotions, and that will help you to relieve even your true emotions, even the emotions that are related to your real life, and therefore your mind is completely clear. So Aristotle is of the opinion that these plays will help a man to make his mind clean and pure. Thank you. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe for more interesting videos from the field of criticism.